first panelist is Noor. Noor is a junior pre-med student at WashU. Noor, we've never met in person, but I saw your interview on Between the Lines, WashU Between the Lines, and you said so many great things about yourself, important things about yourself and identity markers. And I'm so happy to be talking to you. So you can give your name, your pronouns, and any other way that you're comfortable identifying yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. So my name is Noor Ghanam. In Arabic, it's pronounced Noor Ghanam. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I guess I would identify as a Muslim Arab American woman. That is what I feel comfortable identifying as.
Excellent. Okay, so we can get right into the questions. So the acronym BIPOC, or BIPOC, referring to Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, first appeared around 2013 and has become more widespread in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. Doing your part in spreading information about marginalized identities is important, but doing all the research for people can be counterproductive. BIPOC is an acronym for Black and Indigenous People of Color. How do you feel about this acronym, and in what ways does it or does it not represent you?
Yeah, that is a really great and important question, I think. Well, first of all, I think it's crazy that this term was developed in 2013, and I've only recently started hearing about it, like late 2020. So it's interesting now that it's becoming used so widely, given that it was developed a while ago. So BIPOC, I really don't know how to feel about the term. I think I have tons of mixed opinions and about how it does represent me or doesn't represent me. I technically consider myself to be a woman of color, but on every form I've ever had to fill out, I've had to label myself as white because Middle Easterners go under white.
Really?
And I'm not, oh yeah, they do. Absolutely. WashU forms, legal forms, everything, white. Even though, yeah, on the SAT, on the MCAT.
That seems inaccurate.
It is inaccurate. It is. When I first applied to college, that was, I'd always known about that. But even in college applications, like it has white and then it has Middle Eastern as a subsection. And so that is what gives me hesitation with saying I belong in the BIPOC, under the BIPOC label, because I identify as BIPOC, not just as a person of color, but I think American society may or may not identify me as a person of color, and that's a really confusing thing to try to grapple with. Not to mention the fact that currently I live in between two different sort of racial structures. So I am Arab American and I was born and raised in the US, but I've lived for, over 6 years in the Middle East. I've lived in Saudi Arabia. For the past 6 years, my family has been living in Doha, Qatar. That's where I am calling you from right now. And all of my relatives, they live in Jordan and Palestine. And so there's a different sort of racial structure and understanding of race. And in the Middle East, I definitely carry a lot of privilege because of the way I look. Being Muslim is nothing new in the Middle East. Wearing a hijab is nothing new in the Middle East. And my skin color doesn't make my life, more difficult for me in the Middle East. But then in the US, it does. And I don't know whether to separate that from is it because of my skin color, or is it because of the fact that I wear the hijab? Is it the fact that I'm Middle Eastern? And I think the word color itself just confuses me because of that. What does it mean to be a person of color? So that was a very long spiel, but
no,
I guess I think a lot about that and what it means to be a person of color. And I guess another thing I wanted to say real quickly is the whole lumping together of BIPOC. That's, I guess, one issue I have with the term. I'm glad that it expanded from POC to BIPOC because I think that was really important. But I feel like when you lump people of color together, it becomes really difficult to sort of separate the different dynamics within communities of color because, as you know, there's lots of anti-Blackness in certain communities of color or anti-Asian sentiment in certain communities of color. And I feel like when you lump people of color together, it can be very us against them in terms of people of color versus non-people of color, to the point that you forget that oppression is not equalized across all people of color. There are different dynamics that need to be acknowledged. And yeah, so that's how I feel about the term. That was a lot.
You said so many great things. I think that's so interesting. I'm sorry, like I had no idea that legally you have to list yourself as white and then Middle Eastern. I guess it's very symbolic of just person first language, and like again why BIPOC has been coined. And I'm specifically thinking about historically, for example, colored people and how that's not person first language, and how like it definitely centers skin color, obviously, and how BIPOC is supposed to go against that. And then you're talking about how race looks differently in Qatar, where you're located, and then in the United States. And I think that I know personally Blackness is changing rapidly, but I'm not so sure I can say race is changing rapidly, but I do think that people are taking the time to evaluate race relations, and because we live in a very white world.
Right.
And they're just now, like we talked about BIPOC being coined in 2013, and then people are just now using it. People are just now putting words where they should be. But I also understand the hesitation with BIPOC. There does seem to be like a lumping together. But you also just said so many great things, and I'm not going to be able to respond to all of them like I wish I could. But thank you for that answer. I think it's very valid. Yeah, and thank you for giving like your experience and just thinking about the term, because any type of work that we're doing should be I'm losing my train of thought here. But any type of work that we're doing to think about these terms as BIPOC women, we need to give praise to that, to ourselves, because I think we're always thinking about race relations and how we're viewed. So thank you. So our next question. Attending a predominantly white institution has many challenges, and it can be hard to navigate your identity. We all live different lives and gain insight for navigating these spaces. How did you navigate power structures early in your academic experience or career versus later in your academic experience when you had a more formal leadership role on campus or in your work?
Right. No. Well, first of all, thank you for asking this question and the previous question. I love these questions. I think they're very thought-provoking, and I definitely had to sit down and think about things because, yeah. So first of all, I just want to say that, whenever you're a woman of color, especially like a BIPOC woman, I feel like it's really easy to just internalize these power structures and use them against yourself in a way. Like, it's already hard enough when the world is against you, but then to kind of internalize that and pit yourself against yourself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, early on in my WashU experience, I limited my own opportunities because I am a woman of color. You know, like if I wanted to write, so in my fiction writing classes, you know, at first I wanted to write a really provocative story about being a Middle Eastern woman. But then I was afraid. I was like, am I perpetuating stereotypes about Muslim women? Am I going to perpetuate stereotypes about Middle Eastern women? What are people going to think about my culture and my identity? And they're going to think that all Muslim Middle Eastern people are like this. And so I didn't write that story because I was afraid, although I'm sure if I wrote it, it would have been a really great one. And that's kind of the thing that I did early on throughout my WashU experience. You know, I didn't join a club if it was like mostly white, or I didn't take a class because it was a class about like the Middle East and I was afraid I would just be picked out of the crowd and, you know, ask questions about it, about politics that I don't even know about and I'm trying to learn about. Like, that's why I'm in the class, not to give you my expert opinion, but throughout my WashU experience, like freshman, beginning of sophomore year, I just didn't do a lot of the things that I wanted to do because I just thought I wouldn't be wanted or I would be put in a tough situation. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And I think later, you know, I don't know what happened. And I guess this is advice I have for people. Just like, I decided to stop giving a crap. So whenever I write short stories, because I love writing, I just write about identity, but I do it freely because you know what? Even if people who don't understand, there will be people like me who do understand and I don't have to explain it to. And so I create freely and I chase opportunities freely. And I think, you know, the more leadership roles I gain and the more opportunities I get involved in, the more of a voice I have, the more I can mobilize others to really educate themselves and make space for like people like me, for example, to get involved so that they themselves don't have to question their own belonging in a certain space. Was I clear about that? I feel like,
yes, absolutely.
Like I wasn't. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up classes into that conversation. I think that for me personally, and other panelists may bring up the administration. And so just thank you for that, giving that experience. Personally, when I got to WashU, I always knew I wanted to study African and African American studies. I think it's such a broad major, so I'm still able to get the things that I want out of my major. But I know that some of my peers, and particularly my Black women peers, and I've also heard this from women in with respect that paralleling to women not wanting to take women in gender studies courses, is that, you know, like it gets complicated because these classes are about our lived experiences. And so I kind of catch an attitude sometimes. I'm like, how could you give me this? How could you not give me an A? And this is my lived and this is my lived experience here. It's not yours. So I do think that's something that's really interesting for navigating power structures. I do think that there is power in taking classes that are about you. And I'm really glad that you seem to work something out between yourself and the university. Because I think that you deserve to take classes. Everyone deserves to take a class about that celebrates their identity, their culture, and their experiences.
No, absolutely. And the first thing I do when I'm trying to register for, well, thank you for sharing what you shared. And like when I'm looking at the course registration, for example, like the first thing I try to do too is to see whether the person teaching that course, and maybe this is a little unfair of me, but if they have the same identity as the identity they're talking about, just because, you know, I find it hard to trust somebody with like a PhD in like Middle Eastern or Islamic studies. And I feel like that, not to disrespect their work or the time they put into it, but it can be tough. It can be tough to trust them and go into it. Or like classes about religion but anyways. So thank you for acknowledging the whole class thing. And I think administration also plays a really big part in it. I'll save that for later, but I've definitely emailed quite a few times. You know.
And just to talk more about that, I literally make a point, and I guess I'm kind of like I make a point to ask all of my white African and African American studies professors, what made you choose this? Why are you teaching this? And I think it allows for me to hear about that, because I think that it's important. Like, that's really important for you to I guess give an explanation to the people that you are teaching. It is their experience. So I think that's something that I think other people should ask. So I literally ask the questions. And if that is what you are involved in your teaching, you should be able to answer.
I love that. I really love that. I think that that is so powerful. You're right. That's a good question. And I love how you said, like, if you're teaching that, then you should be able to answer.
Yeah,
100%. That was great.
Literally, great. Ask them. Just ask them. But okay, our next question. So as students, we're familiar with this term, the grind. And so it's this lingo that refers to work, and to people only being valuable by how much work they produce. And for students, that work is often academic and campus community work. How does the grind look differently for BIPOC women?
The grind, I love this question because I think it needs to be asked more and acknowledged more. The grind for BIPOC women, I feel like you just always feel like you have a lot more to prove to everybody. To your peers, to your professors. A lot of it comes from the stereotypes that come with your identity. You want to make sure to not fall into those stereotypes, and it can get really hard, like, for example, like, there's this stereotype that all, Arab parents want their kids to go into medicine. And I am an Arab girl with immigrant Arab parents, and I am going into medicine. And for some reason, completely unprovoked, I just feel the need to justify my choice to go into medicine. And I feel the need to, make sure my professors know that this is something I'm very passionate about and that I really want to study medicine. And this might seem like a really basic thing, but sometimes I wonder if, like, white people, especially white men, ever have to do that. Like, if they ever, are taking a biology class and feel like they have to just, justify to their professor why they're taking it versus not. Like, I remember back in high school, sorry, this is going back in high school, not in college, but I remember having a few professors, just kind of trying to push me away from medicine and sort of make me feel like my choice to go into it wasn't really my choice. Like, oh, do your parents want you to become doctors? Or, you should consider this. Or, okay, I'm not saying it right because the way I'm saying it seems very subdued.
No,
but I definitely
follow.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So I just really felt that, like, it's my choice. And it's tough to answer the question, why medicine? Hello, I have to write a personal statement about it. That it takes time to do that, but I can't say that to everybody. But I just feel like intrinsically I have to justify that choice because of the stereotype. But I think the grind also for BIPOC women, it carries with this constant feeling of being underestimated. Like, people are surprised when you say something smart. People are surprised when you have a talent or a good idea. And it's like, yeah, like, that's me. Like, I'm talented, I'm smart,
Exactly.
but I just sometimes feel that surprise, and it just hits me all over again. Like, wow, people really kind of underestimate BIPOC women.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess finally, one thing I wanted to say too was about microaggressions and how they contribute heavily to feeling like you need to grind more with schoolwork. Again, more you have to prove. Like, for example, and there's been a couple of professors. I went to their office hours and they were very unreciprocative. I don't know if that's a word, just kind of cold. Um,
Hmm.
Dare I say disrespectful. And it was just really, I felt totally devalued as a student, as a hardworking student. Yes, sometimes I ask silly questions, but I ask them because I'm trying to understand and do well in your course. But then, for those professors, I talked to another friend, that's white, taking those classes, and she said, oh no, like those professors are so sweet. Every time I go into their office hours, they're great. And so I was like, okay, my professors maybe just don't like me. But then I talked to my other BIPOC female friends, and for them, the experience is similar. And they're like, yeah, when I went in, this professor was kind of rude. And so I think just in that, feeling like your professors already have these preconceptions of you. And by the way, not all professors. I'm talking about like a few from my perspective. But that in itself makes you feel like you have even more to prove because you've shown up to office hours one time and your professor has been slightly standoffish, and that already makes you feel like you've got to work harder and do better and be better,
Yeah.
even if you're doing just fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of people can identify with that same story.
Yeah.
Especially BIPOC women. And then for myself as a Black woman, there's like this sort of mantra that we have to be twice as good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has come from, I think, ancestral trauma. Like your family, your community members going through those experiences, being told that they're not as good, or giving the it's implied that I don't like you because of your identity, and things like that. I also really what did you bring up? You talked about classes again. Talked about classes again. And it made me think about your justification of feeling like you have to justify wanting to go to med school. And I can relate to that because I've always wanted to major in African and African American studies. And one of my parents, not to call them out, but one of my parents was really iffy about that. I was like, well, what are you going to do with that major? And so I actually have two majors. So I'm double majoring in African and African American studies and education. And although I love the education department here at WashU, I'm not so entirely sure if I would have double majored without that kind of pushback to my major. And having to, I think yours was justifying that to a professor, but mine was more so justifying it to a parent. So I think with that, we can see like the kind of like the nuances,
Right.
like BIPOC, everyone who's represented in the acronym. But yeah, there's a lot about the grind and making sure that, I don't know. I think with that, double majoring, I think taking on more work is definitely something that BIPOC women feel inclined to do. And we shouldn't have to feel that way. So I think I also wanted to hear your thoughts about this next question. So BIPOC becomes complicated as the term works to recenter anti-Blackness and the erasure of Indigenous people. How should diversity and inclusion workers effectively create solidarity for Black, Indigenous, and women of color while respecting individual identifying stories at WashU?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing what you said before the question. Second of all, this question had me in a rut so much. I sat there for so long and stared at this question.
What's the answer?
And I just couldn't think of things. A few things did come up, and I'm afraid they're not as, I guess, nuanced as I would like my answer to be, especially with a topic as important as diversity and inclusion. But I was thinking about events like this. I know this is simple, but I think it's really impactful, where you have different BIPOC individuals speaking about their individual experiences, but with sort of united goals, such as, asking the same questions because you acknowledge that there are similar threads in experience, but somebody who is Black versus someone who is Middle Eastern versus somebody who is, East Asian might have a different response to that sort of question. And I think that in itself is really powerful because it highlights our common threads, but also our differences. Mm-hmm. But I just think it could be really impactful for, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, for example, to put a special emphasis on, I guess, various systems of oppression or discrimination, especially as they go between communities of color. And I've actually noticed quite a few groups, like at WashU, for example, like having discussions about like anti-Blackness within their own communities and such. And I think that is really powerful because in a sense it does unite people of color. But I don't know. I really don't. This question, I really wasn't sure how to answer it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm really sorry that I don't. It's a tough one.
No, you're completely fine. I think a lot of that, a lot of the not knowing comes from a place of being marginalized, and it's hard to put into words how diversity and inclusion workers, because diversity and inclusion workers is encompassing of anyone who wants to do that work, whether or not they actually identify with you or not. So a lot of the not knowing comes from not knowing how to put into words how people can do that genuinely. So it's really weird. And then it also gets into people of marginalized identities feeling like they are the spokesperson for their identity, especially at WashU, where in WashU is a very white institution. And so it's just a really hard question, and I completely understand. For me personally, I don't think that it is necessarily up to us as students completely, even though I do think that we have a major role to play in shaping the university and making it more inclusive for all of us. But I do think that the university has majority of the power because they have the majority of the money. And so I think that the university has a social responsibility to take care of its students, has a social responsibility to the larger St. Louis community, and needs to put in that extra footing to setting an example for students in diversity and inclusion work. So yeah, thank you for that answer, Noor.
Sorry, just to clarify too, I think reading diversity and inclusion workers, I think I was just thinking about the CDI. I wasn't creative enough to think past that and how like every individual who really cares about promoting diversity and inclusion counts as a worker of diversity and inclusion. So thank you for clarifying that and offering just, yeah, thank you for the clarification because I definitely sat there. It's like, dang. But yeah. And you're right about the university, like 100%. They definitely need to be doing more. And I hope we see more of that in the future.
We better. Okay, so getting into our next question, I also wanted to hear your thoughts about, so because BIPOC women are marginalized, it is easy to feel like we are walking through life alone. What are some factors that have helped you boost your resilience? And what advice do you have for BIPOC women to find their safe, celebratory spaces on college campuses and beyond?
Again, great question. These are wonderful questions, all of them. So
I try.
The first thing I want to talk about is ask every question. Mm-hmm. Ask the difficult questions. And by this, I mean, you know, sometimes as BIPOC women, we can just kind of take microaggressions and let them like slide off our shoulders, or at least, you know, when you're dealing with so much and it's exhausting and you kind of don't want to think about the fact that X professor might not like you because you're a BIPOC woman. I think something that has helped me find my safe space on campus is touching into my network of other women of color and just asking them like, hey, did you also feel like this professor was a little bit standoffish? Or, hey, was this student a little bit so-and-so? And you know, like, as a BIPOC woman, you've got to advocate for yourself. Unfortunately, a lot of that work does rest on our own shoulders. But something I found that has helped me find safe places on campus is literally knowing the places and the people that are safe. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that happens through leaning on other women of color and asking them these questions and having these difficult conversations. And, you know, I feel all the more lighter for it. Like I spoke earlier about the professor that made me and my other friend who's a woman of color feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You know, we sat in the library drinking our hot chocolates and talked about it, and then we laughed about it, and then I just felt better, you know. I really did. And I think that's important, just being able to lean on other women of color. And another thing too I want to say is, do not be afraid to hang out with your own like social group of identity. Oh my gosh, that is something that is just so, I don't know how to phrase this. But, you know, whenever people of a certain group hang out with each other, a lot of passerbys will make disparaging comments, or they'll make assumptions or perpetuate stereotypes. But like, to BIPOC women, like, my advice for you is, do not be afraid to just hang out with people of your own identity and do it in public, you know, if you feel safe doing it in certain places. Like, I remember when I was younger, oh my gosh, there was another Muslim girl. There were a couple, but one Muslim girl, she wore the hijab, and I was afraid. This was in middle school when I was in the US, and I didn't want to hang out with her because I didn't want people to think that the two Middle Eastern Muslim women were like hanging out with each other, because I just didn't want to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And that's disappointing because I missed out on a really great friendship with a really great woman, and that sucks. But lately, as I've gotten older, I've realized, screw that. And so I go to Friday prayers at WashU, and I go to MENA, WashU Middle Eastern and North African Association, go to their events, and I'm on their journal committee. So I'll be writing about my own identity. And, you know, that's been uplifting, recognizing that this is my community and I have every right to appreciate being part of that community. You know, community solidarity isn't only important in difficult times, it's also important for celebrating and having good times. And, you know, that has been really important in empowering me. throughout my college experience and hopefully beyond. And then, you know, I guess another thing that has helped me too um, is being willing to just have difficult conversations. You know, like a lot of people who commit like microaggressions or just make comments or, you know, say offensive things, you know, there are some people that are truly doing it to be cruel. There are some people that genuinely don't know any better. And while I do agree that it's not, you know, our responsibility to necessarily educate others because that puts a lot of pressure on yourself, sometimes I found that it helps to just call people out, people that are receptive to being called out. Because I know I'd appreciate it if people did the same for me, even though I try to be more cognizant because I'm learning a lot. Like, for example, you know, one time I was eating lunch with a group and this one person asked me a lot of questions about my own identity. And like, they truly didn't know, but some of them were kind of offensive. And I let it slide, but then I went back to my dorm and I actually cried. I was pretty upset. And then I texted them because I liked them before they asked all those questions. And I was like, hey, you know, you really upset me. These questions were not nice. And they were super like apologetic about it. And really, I felt they were pretty sincere. And we had a long conversation about the questions they asked. And, you know, now I consider us to be friends, like not close friends, but friends. I don't know how to feel about that kind of advice. I don't know if I would give that advice to people because, again, I want to emphasize it's not your responsibility to educate others. And you don't have to be friends with anybody who has said something upsetting to you or has made you uncomfortable at some point. Like, I just really want to emphasize that. But I think for me, something that has helped is kind of taking back those comments and being like, you said something that upset me, and here's why. But again, nobody is obligated to educate other people. Like, I just want to say that because I made that mistake.
And that's,
you know?
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And that's not even necessarily educating them. That's you setting your boundaries
Right.
as a BIPOC woman. So I think a lot of times we can get confused with that because I think educating does emit a lot of energy from you, but not setting your boundaries and letting someone know that what they said was offensive is even more draining for you because then you can hear this person again. So, but thank you so much. You said a lot of excellent things.
Thank you.
I loved your answer about the portion of your answer about simply asking people, you know, about your similar experience. Because I do think that 9 times out of 10, when you are a minority student at a predominantly white institution, other people are likely feeling the same things that you're feeling. And you just have to ask, and that's how you can grow your safe spaces. I thought about just in terms of celebratory spaces, I thought about my experience and how thinking about you being reluctant to make friends with a person that you shared the same identity with, and how that literally operates before we even see these people, and you already have in your mind that, hey, I don't think I want to be, you know, like either a token Black person or someone who only hangs around people of my identity. So I thought about FSAP. It's a program at WashU, and how I was a little hesitant about not attending, but when I got there, I did kind of feel weird that all of the students there were underprivileged students. And so what exactly is the university trying to like say or achieve, and will it be genuine? But I had an excellent time, and I found my safe space with those students, and I now feel like in terms of my class, WashU 22, our class, WashU
Oh
22,
my gosh, yes.
the students that I met there, I feel like I can ask them for anything, literally for anything. And I feel so bad that there are so many students who share my identity on campus, but just are not taking the time to put themselves out there to at least be seen by their community. Because I think we should not be running away from our safe spaces. I think that's a no-no.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for sharing that. That is that, yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think some of that some of it is a responsibility that falls to the people that are really proud and integrated and like not necessarily as hesitant. Like I feel like it's important to reach out. Like I was really hesitant to join certain WashU groups until people of my identity reached out to me specifically and said, hey, like you should come with us and do things. And they were older students. And you know, when you're young, you want to impress the older students. You're like, okay, I'll go. And it just, I think that makes all the difference. So if you're hesitant, you know, I hope, or not you, I think I'm speaking to general. It's just different when we're on Zoom and I'm technically only talking to you, but I know other people will hear it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to reach out. And if you can't reach out, then I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying reach out to people. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not coming out right.
You're perfectly fine. Just a short anecdote. I guess if this does not influence you to go out and find your safe space, I don't know what will. But when I was in middle school, I attended a summer camp, and we all had mentors. Each student had a mentor. And every lunch period, I would sit with, the girls who shared my identity, and they were Black girls. And back then, I wasn't even necessarily conscious that I was doing that. I just said, these are my friends. But I had no real, consciousness about why I'm sitting with these people, which was, and I think it's okay to say I'm sitting with these people because they are Black, because they share my experience, because the camp was majority non-Black. And so one time, this counselor, supposed to be my mentor, pulled me aside and told me, hey, I want you to try to sit with someone else. And so some people had the same mentor. So I would ask the white students, hey, did this mentor ask you to sit with someone else? And they would say no. So I was like, oh, wow, you want me to not sit with my friends because you are threatened by a group of Black girls sitting together. And I had to only be 11 or 12 years old, but I understood then that that's what was happening. So I think that, finding your safe spaces and choosing to be there is very powerful. And sometimes the people who do not celebrate our identities, they are reluctant to that because they know that it's powerful. And I think that everybody should, take part in that. I think it's something great to experience, especially as BIPOC women. So we should not be running away from our.
No, we should not. Thank you for sharing that anecdote. That was a very powerful one, and I'm sorry that happened. Those things happen when you're young,
Yeah.
They really shape you.
Ridiculous. Mm-hmm. We can get to our next question. I'm really interested in just the lies that we have been told about what it means to be a woman or what it means to be ourselves. And I say lie, and I know lie has a really negative connotation. I say lie, and I use it as it is because these lies come from people who they might come from other women, but a lot of times they come from people who are not celebratory of women, or if it's from another woman, it's not from a place. It's from a place of, again, this. I guess I can say like the patriarchy and internalized misogyny. So what is one lie that you've been told about what it means to be a woman?
I'll say this for the last time. This is a wonderful question. I love it. And I love the blatant use of the word lie because, I agree with that 100%. So this is the lie that I think has impacted me the most, I want to say, just thinking about my life and the person that I am, that emotions are somewhat invaluable, and to be successful, you've got to find a way to suppress them.
Mm-hmm.
Just emotions. God, like, growing up, I was a pretty sensitive girl, not sensitive in terms of, to how other people treated me per se, but, if I stepped on an ant, I would cry. I would feel really bad for that ant. Or if really, you're just stepping on it. I was really sensitive in that way. I really valued life, and I valued past tense. I don't mean that, but I just really cared about everything. I cared about social issues, and oh my gosh, a tree in our neighborhood got cut down and I cried because of it. And, I think through those teenage years, which is crazy to say because I'm not a teenager anymore, I was sort of whittled into believing that my emotions were invalid or that they would weaken me. Just like, oh, you're so dramatic. Oh, you're so negative. Oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, this doesn't matter. And this doesn't matter. And this doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that was difficult. And I really suppressed a lot of what I was feeling. And it kind of ate me up inside. And recently, so I've gotten into short story writing. I actually have a collection coming out this semester, which is so exciting. I'm really excited. But when I discovered writing, it was like I could just pour all of my emotions into it. And I just went through my life, went through the 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th, 9th through 12th. And I just wrote about my experiences and all the emotion I was feeling. And I think emotion really drives me as a person. I think it makes me a better person. I think it's going to make me a better doctor because, it's not uncontrollable emotion. Like, I don't want it to sound like I was weeping all the time, and whenever I have work to do, I'm able to put it aside and go to work. Mm-hmm. But, when you show strong emotions, people just assume that you're constantly emotional and that you're unable to produce the results that you can produce. Mm-hmm. And I just really want to affirm anybody who feels like they can relate to that you can do what it is that you want to do. And instead of believing that your emotions weaken you, let them drive you, let that sensitivity drive you. It's never a bad thing to care about things and care about the world. And, yes, I do believe sometimes emotions can be too much, but I mean like at a regular level, as a woman, you're made to believe that that's too much. And I think that sucks because emotion is really important and it makes us do important things.
Absolutely. That's just like a wonderfully insightful answer. You said so many things. I just first want to say that it sounds like you were a wonderful little girl, and you were ahead of your time for caring so much. So I think that a lot of people are just now beginning to care. And similar to that, just touching on emotions and how emotions are associated with women largely, no matter what our personalities are, that we're just emotional creatures. I've said this before, but, and I'm not 100% if this is completely accurate, but so many wars have been started by men, And yeah, and the absence of emotion does not mean the presence of logic. That's something that I have
I
learned.
love that.
Yes. And I think in high school, I was a really passionate person. I do think I am sensitive, but not sensitive in the, I guess, like the commercial way that sensitivity is displayed. I was just a really passionate individual. And that's something that I've had to learn. Similar to you, I care a lot, and I was always debating people about their worldviews, and typically these worldviews that I was debating against were misogynistic, racist, homophobic. And so I think that my passion, my emotions were definitely my strength. And I think that um, emotions make you a better person. They make you a great leader. And I think that women, although I don't think that women are just, emotional creatures, I think that's a strength and not a weakness. And for me personally, the lie that I have been told, just getting into that realm of like emotions and then like broader femininity, I guess the lie is that women owe people pretty, and we don't owe anybody pretty. And it's something, as a 21-year-old, it's something that I'm still reckoning with, because now if someone is like, who are you dressing up for? And I'll respond, I'm dressing up for myself. How much of that is actually true? Because I'm still working on, I guess like this theme of beauty politics and how women should represent themselves, and how many standards that society has for women. I've been having to deprogram my mind of those lies, because it's perfectly fine to accept yourself as is and still have self-esteem and still say that you are worth something and that you deserve certain things. So that is the lie. But I think that there are so many things about femininity that we are just now starting to counteract, because we live in a white world, and then also we live in a patriarchal society. And so we're just now, again, putting words where they should be. And so I want to thank you for the lie that you have explained to us. And hopefully the people watching can deprogram that as well. I think that a lot of people can identify with your story. So thank you so much, Noor. I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you want people who look like you to know?
Okay, if you are a person that looks like me and you are watching this, please reach out. I would just love to talk. I would love to get to know you. I would love to be your friend and direct you to resources, especially if you're younger. I feel like I'm so old now. We're gonna be seniors next year.
I am at the pinnacle of youth.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm the one feeling old, man. But
we're getting old.
I don't even know the freshmen this year. So
neither.
Reach out. I would just love to get to know you better. And I hope this has been helpful in any way. I just want to thank you, by the way, for this conversation. Like, I've learned so much from you in this space, and like, seriously, thank you. And like, I'm sad we never really talked before.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking now. Me and Nora are about to be besties. She doesn't know it, but I've enjoyed this conversation so much. And
me too.
Just so happy to have spoken to you, and hopefully we can meet one day. I'm in St. Louis.
Yes, I would love that. Well, I'll be in St. Louis starting in the summer. So by the fall, I'll be there. I will be there. We're going to have a great senior year, and I will hopefully see you.
Absolutely. Oh, are there any projects that you're working on?
Ooh, projects in regards to what exactly?
Any things that you are involved in on campus? Oh, you mentioned your writing and how you're gonna put out a I can't quite remember what it was.
Yes, a short story collection. So that is really exciting. It's actually it's a oh my gosh, there are quite a few. I think about like 40 short stories, all by the perspective of Muslim women. They're all different Muslim women. So that's something to look out for. I'm involved in, should I just like list what I'm involved in? I feel really weird doing that, but I can totally do that. um, wait, sorry, what did you say?
Go for it.
Oh, go for it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm also involved in the Civic Scholars Program with the Gephardt Institute for Community and Civic Engagement. The Gephardt Institute is wonderful, the staff is wonderful, and the Civic Scholars Program is also wonderful. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask me. And for my Civic Summer, which is a part of the Civic Scholars Program, I'll be working with children with severe chronic illness and help them develop stories about their own illnesses, which will be really nice. And unfortunately, being overseas during the pandemic and with time zones, I've kind of been disconnected from student groups. Like before, I was really involved in like Globe Med, for example, but I had to take a whole year off because they meet really late my time. Oh yeah, and I'm also a medical humanities student advisor. So if anybody's interested in the minor, again, feel free to reach out to me and I can direct you to some resources and tell you all about it. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. How can people connect with you?
Yes, so, okay, you can always find me on Instagram. It's not_normal, NOT_NOORMAL. And I'll likely respond to you there quicker than through email, but you can reach out to me through my WashU email, noor.ghanam@wustl.edu, noor.ghanam. Yeah, so email or Instagram. If you find me as a mutual friend on Facebook, add me, that's fine. Anywhere you can, I'm on every social media, so just add me and ask me, I'll be there.
Okay, thank you so much, Noor. I hope we can have more conversations together, but you just brought so many ideas, and I hope a lot of people can resonate with them or at least just feel a little bit more heard, a little bit more understood. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Yeah, oh my God. It's 3. I'm excited. I love sleep. I'm so tired, but it's a good tired. This was like a really great use of my time. Got to know you better. I had a great conversation, and hopefully people watching this enjoy it. Thank you for organizing this event.
Thank you. It was so nice meeting you. I'm so serious. Oh my goodness.
Same here. Same here. All right. I will let you talk to other people because I realize they've been waiting a while.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.